A 5-year-old girl sits in the backseat of a car. The car is her home now, has been for weeks, ever since her family was evicted from their apartment. She sits with her two half-brothers, toddlers who do not understand what is happening. Her father is driving. Her stepmother is in the passenger seat. They are heading to a methadone clinic, then to Burger King, then to buy drugs. It is December 7th, 2019, and it is the last day of Harmony Montgomery's life. The little girl has an accident. She wets herself, something she cannot control, something that started happening when they became homeless and she lost access to regular bathrooms. Her father turns around and hits her. He hits her again. At every red light, he turns and punches her in the face and head. His wife tells him to stop, but he does not stop. He keeps hitting her until he feels something different, until he realizes he has done something terrible. He says it out loud. "I think I really hurt her this time." Harmony makes moaning sounds for 5 minutes. Then she goes silent. Her father does not call 911. He does not take her to a hospital. Instead, he stuffs her small body into a duffel bag and hides it in a snowbank. Over the next 3 months, he will move her remains from place to place: a cooler, a ceiling vent in a homeless shelter, the freezer at a pizza restaurant where he works, a refrigerator in the apartment they eventually rent. He will buy lime to dissolve what remains. He will rent a U-Haul and drive her body to an unknown location. Her remains have never been found. For 2 years after her death, no one reported Harmony missing. Her father told people she was living with her mother. Her stepmother said the same thing. The child welfare systems in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, the systems that were supposed to protect her, lost track of her entirely. It was not until November 2021 that her biological mother, who had been trying to contact her for years, finally convinced police to investigate. By then, Harmony had been dead for almost 2 years. This is the story of Harmony Montgomery, a little girl who was failed by everyone who should have protected her. It is a story of system failure, of bureaucratic negligence, of a violent father and a complicit stepmother. It is a story that should never have happened. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from tonight. And if you haven't already, we hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we bring you another case that will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. Harmony Renee Montgomery was born on June 7th, 2014, in Haverhill, Massachusetts, a small city on the Merrimack River near the New Hampshire border. Her mother was Crystal Sorey, 24 years old and struggling with drug addiction. Her father was Adam Montgomery, 25 years old and sitting in a jail cell at the time of her birth. 5 months before Harmony was born, Adam Montgomery had gone to buy heroin in the Acre neighborhood of Haverhill. The drug deal turned violent. Adam shot a man named Robert Jacobs in the face. In the chaos that followed, Jacobs' brother shot Adam in the arm. Crystal Sorey, pregnant with Harmony, was present during the shooting. When police arrived, they found her hiding in an abandoned shed behind the building in the middle of a winter night, endangering herself and her unborn child. Adam was arrested and charged with armed robbery, assault with intent to murder, carrying a firearm without a license, and discharging a firearm within 500 feet of a building. He pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 18 months in jail. This was not his first brush with the law. His criminal record stretched back to his teenage years, a litany of violence and threats. Pulling a knife on a 15-year-old girlfriend, stabbing a teenager and pushing him out of a moving vehicle, armed robbery, assault. At 18, he had burst into a Malden apartment and demanded money from two women at gunpoint. He pointed what appeared to be a gun at a police officer's chest before being subdued. The weapon turned out to be a pellet gun, but the violence was real enough. This was the man who would one day be awarded custody of Harmony Montgomery. From the moment of her birth, Harmony's life was marked by instability and the intervention of Child Protective Services. Within days of her delivery, the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families received 3 reports alleging neglect of the newborn due to Crystal's substance use. The reports described a mother who was still using drugs, who could not provide the stable environment a newborn needs. DCF gave Crystal a chance to address her addiction, but by August 2014, when Harmony was 2 months old, 2 more reports came in. Our DCF concluded that Crystal continued to struggle with drug abuse and that Harmony was at risk. At 2 months old, Harmony was removed from her mother's care and placed in foster care with Tim and Michelle Raftery, a family who would become the closest thing to stability she would ever know. The Rafteries were experienced foster parents who had cared for other children. They opened their home to this tiny baby with her uncertain prognosis, not knowing what her future would hold, only knowing that she needed love and care. The goal at that point was reunification, the hope that Crystal could get clean and Harmony could eventually return to her mother. But Harmony was also born with serious health challenges that required specialized attention. She was diagnosed with a rare brain condition called holoprosencephaly shortly after birth. Doctors delivered a devastating prognosis to Crystal, telling her that Harmony was blind in both eyes and had less than a year to live. The diagnosis cast a shadow over Harmony's early days, a sentence of doom that would later prove to be overstated. For months, Crystal lived with the belief that her daughter would die before her first birthday. But Michelle Raftery noticed something the doctors had missed. She observed that Harmony could track objects with her eyes, could follow movement, could see more than the initial diagnosis suggested. She pushed for further evaluation, advocating for her foster daughter in a way that Crystal, overwhelmed by addiction and the challenges of her own life, could not. The diagnosis was revised to septo-optic dysplasia, a serious but not fatal condition. Harmony was legally blind in her left eye and had special needs, but she was not dying. She could live a full life if she was given the chance. The Rafteries fell in love with Harmony. They wanted to adopt her, to make her a permanent part of their family. They had given her stability during the most critical months of her development. They understood her medical needs, knew her personality, had bonded with her in the way that parents bond with children. But the system was not designed to make adoption easy. The system was designed to prioritize reunification with biological parents, even when those parents had repeatedly demonstrated that they could not care for their children. For the next 4.5 years, Harmony bounced between her foster family and her biological mother, in a cycle of hope and disappointment that would leave lasting scars. She was returned to Crystal in January 2015 when she was 7 months old. Crystal had completed some treatment requirements, had demonstrated some stability, and DCF believed she deserved another chance. But the stability was an illusion. 4 months later, at 10 months old, Harmony was removed again when Crystal relapsed into drug use. She went back to the Raftery family, who welcomed her without hesitation, who continued to advocate for her permanent placement with them. In July 2015, DCF changed Harmony's permanency goal from reunification to adoption. It seemed like the right decision. Crystal could not stay sober, and Harmony needed stability. The child welfare experts understood that children need permanency, and that the constant back and forth between homes causes developmental harm, that a child cannot thrive when she never knows where she will be living next month. The Rafteries began the process of adopting Harmony, believing that she would finally have a permanent home. But the system moved slowly, and Crystal kept fighting for her daughter. Despite her failures, despite her relapses, she did not want to give up her parental rights. She contested the adoption, made promises she could not keep, showed up to visits when she was able. The case dragged on through the courts, through hearing after hearing, while Harmony remained in limbo. In February 2017, the DCF case management team made a fateful decision. They changed Harmony's goal back to reunification after Crystal appeared to be making progress. Crystal had enrolled in a parenting class. Once she was visiting Harmony consistently at the DCF office. She seemed on paper to be turning her life around. The team decided to give her one more chance. In March 2017, Harmony was returned to her mother for the second time. She was almost 3 years old and had spent most of her life in foster care. She had been with the Rafteries for the better part of 2 years during her second stint in their home. Now she was going back to a mother she barely knew, to a home without the structure and stability she needed. The second reunification failed too, as everyone who understood addiction could have predicted. In January 2018, when Harmony was 3.5, she was removed from Crystal once again due to neglect associated with renewed substance abuse. Crystal had relapsed. She could not care for her daughter. The cycle continued. Harmony went back to the Raftery foster home, the only place she had ever been safe and loved. She had now been removed from her mother 3 times. She had experienced the trauma of repeated separations, the confusion of never knowing where she belonged. The experts who study child development would call this profound instability, a recipe for lasting harm. But the system continued to operate as if Crystal's parental rights were more important than Harmony's need for a stable home. Throughout this entire period, Adam Montgomery was a ghost in his daughter's life. He was a name on forms, a father who existed legally but not practically. He was in prison when Harmony was born. When he was released in September 2015, he moved to New Hampshire and began dating a woman named Kayla Rivera. He did not contact DCF about Harmony for over a year. He made no effort to see his daughter, no attempt to be part of her life. When he finally resurfaced in October 2016, expressing interest in seeing his daughter, DCF facilitated supervised visits. These visits were held at the DCF office, with a caseworker present to observe. Adam would show up, spend an hour or two with Harmony, and leave. The visits were sporadic. He would attend for a few months, then disappear again. He showed no commitment to being a consistent presence in his daughter's life. But these brief, supervised visits were enough to establish a legal relationship. They were enough to give Adam standing to petition for custody when the time came. They were enough to make him look, on paper, like a father who cared about his daughter. And even though the reality was that he barely knew her. By the Office of the Child Advocate's later estimate, Harmony spent a total of approximately 40 hours with her father, over the course of 20 supervised visits from her birth to age 4.5. That is roughly 20 hours over 4.5 years, the entirety of her relationship with the man who would soon have complete control over her life. 20 hours of supervised visits in a DCF office, no overnights, no unsupervised time, no opportunity to demonstrate that he could actually parent a child, let alone a child with special needs. In late 2018, Crystal Sorey permanently lost custody of Harmony and her other child, a son named Jameson who had a different father. Crystal's parental rights were terminated due to her ongoing struggle with addiction. A Jameson was placed for adoption and was adopted by a loving couple in November 2019. Harmony should have had the same fate. The Raftery family wanted to adopt her. She had lived with them for most of her life. They were the only real family she had ever known. But Adam Montgomery wanted his daughter. In October 2018, Adam petitioned for custody of Harmony. He was now living in Manchester, New Hampshire, with Kayla, whom he had married, and their 2 young sons. He had been out of prison for 3 years. He had a job, an address, a wife. On paper, he looked like a father who had gotten his life together. On paper, he looked like a viable option. The reality was different. Adam and Kayla both struggled with serious substance abuse issues. They were paying their drug dealer with food stamps, and trading the assistance meant to feed their children for heroin and crack cocaine. They did not have enough food for their family. They were unstable, addicted, living on the edge of disaster. But DCF never completed a proper assessment of Adam Montgomery. They never held him accountable for the tasks on his action plan, never developed an understanding of his family or personal history, never evaluated whether he was capable of parenting a child with Harmony's special needs. The case management team focused almost entirely on Crystal Sorey. Adam was an afterthought, a name on a form, a father who showed up occasionally for visits and disappeared again. In December 2018, Massachusetts DCF requested that New Hampshire conduct a home study on Adam and Kayla Montgomery under the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children, which the agreement between states that governs cross-border placements. The initial request lacked the necessary information, and New Hampshire asked for more details. Before they received that information, the situation changed. On February 22, 2019, Judge Mark Newman of the Massachusetts Juvenile Court held a hearing on Harmony's case. Crystal Sorey was not present. She was in another court attending a hearing related to her son's adoption. Her presence was not required, but her absence meant no one spoke for Harmony's relationship with her mother or her foster family. No one told the judge about the Rafteries, about how much they loved Harmony, about how they had cared for her during her most formative years and wanted to adopt her. What happened next would haunt child welfare advocates for years, would become the subject of official investigations and scathing reports, would spark calls for reform across multiple states. Judge Newman awarded full custody of Harmony to Adam Montgomery. The judge ruled that the interstate compact on the placement of children did not apply because Adam had been found to be a fit parent under New Hampshire law. This was a critical decision that bypassed the safeguards designed to protect children being placed across state lines. The ICPC would have required New Hampshire to conduct a home study to verify that Adam had stable housing, that he was employed, that he was sober, that his home was safe for a child. It would have required follow-up supervision after the placement, oversight to ensure that Harmony was thriving in her new environment. Judge Newman decided none of this was necessary. He did not require any home study. He did not require any transition plan for a child who had spent most of her life in foster care and had only 40 hours of contact with her father over 4.5 years. He did not require any follow-up supervision by New Hampshire authorities. He did not require any services or supports to help Harmony adjust to living with a father she barely knew. The DCF attorney objected to the custody transfer, but did not present a strong legal argument. The attorney expressed concerns but did not force the court to confront the reality of Adam Montgomery's violent criminal history, his years of incarceration, his complete lack of parenting experience. The objection was perfunctory, a checkbox rather than a genuine effort to protect a vulnerable child. Harmony's court-appointed attorney, or assigned to represent her interests in the proceedings, did not advocate for her safety, her well-being, or any kind of transition plan. The attorney did not present evidence about Harmony's special needs, her disability, her attachment to her foster family. The attorney did not tell the judge what Harmony wanted, what she needed, what would be required for her to be safe and to thrive. The attorney was silent on all the questions that should have mattered most. No one put Harmony's needs at the center of the discussion. The court prioritized parental rights over child safety, as the Office of the Child Advocate would later conclude. It was an appalling decision, in the words of child welfare advocate Maureen Flatley, and made without the necessary information about the man who had spent years in and out of prison for violent crimes. Judge Newman would later retire. He would never face any consequences for his decision. He would never have to answer for what happened to Harmony Montgomery. 1 week after the hearing, Adam Montgomery drove to Massachusetts and picked up his daughter. He took her back to New Hampshire, to a home that had never been inspected, to a family that had never been assessed, to a future that no one had tried to prepare her for. DCF's involvement ended the moment Adam's car crossed the state line. Massachusetts washed its hands of the case. Harmony was now entirely in her father's custody, in a state that knew almost nothing about her, with a man who had barely spent time with her, in a home that had never been properly evaluated. The Raftery family, who had loved and cared for Harmony for most of her life, who had wanted to adopt her, who had advocated for her medical needs and celebrated her milestones and tucked her into bed at night, never saw her again. They were given no opportunity to say goodbye, no chance to maintain contact, no way to ensure that the little girl they loved was safe. The system that had entrusted Harmony to their care simply took her away and gave her to a stranger. Michelle Raftery would later testify at Adam Montgomery's murder trial, describing the sweet, loving child she had fostered, the child she had wanted to make her own. Her voice broke as she spoke about Harmony. Very happy, she said. A loving child, very sweet. For the next several months, Harmony lived with her father, stepmother, and half-brothers in Manchester. It did not take long for the abuse to begin. Adam was a violent man with a violent history, and that violence extended to his daughter. He hit her. He bashed her around, in the words he would later use to describe it to a family member. In July 2019, Adam's uncle Kevin Montgomery visited from Florida. He noticed that Harmony had a black eye. When he asked about it, Adam allegedly told him he had bashed her around. Kevin was disturbed enough to contact Child Protective Services. An anonymous call was made to New Hampshire's Division for Children, Youth and Families on July 29, 2019, reporting concerns about Harmony. DCYF opened an assessment. A caseworker made 3 home visits over the next few months, 2 of them unannounced. The children appeared happy and healthy, the caseworker concluded. The final visit was on October 1, 2019. The caseworker saw Adam, Kayla, Harmony, and the other children in the household. The assessment was determined to be unfounded. The case was closed. 2 months later, Harmony was dead. In late 2019, The Montgomerys were evicted from their apartment in Manchester. They had no place to go. They began living in their car, a Chrysler Sebring, with 3 young children crammed into the back seat. Adam and Kayla continued using drugs, getting high while their children sat behind them. They had no money, no home, no stability. The children had no access to regular bathrooms, no routine, no safety. Harmony, who had been potty trained, began having accidents. She could not control her bladder in a car where there was no bathroom, no privacy, no way to tell her parents she needed to go. The accidents infuriated Adam, and he hit her every time it happened, punching her in the face, her legs, her hands. The abuse left visible injuries, black eyes, bruises on her face and body. Kayla would later testify that she heard the blows, that they sounded like they hurt, that Harmony cried every time. On December 7, 2019, the family was driving to a methadone clinic. Harmony had another accident. Adam turned around while driving and began hitting her. At every red light, he turned and punched her in the face and head. Kayla told him to stop, but he gave her a look that terrified her, a look she would later describe as the look of an evil man. She feared for her own safety and the safety of her 2 sons. She said nothing more. Adam kept hitting Harmony until he felt something different. He said out loud that he thought he had really hurt her this time. When Harmony began making moaning sounds, quiet sounds of pain that lasted for about 5 minutes. Then she went silent. The family continued their day. They went to Burger King. They bought heroin and crack cocaine. They got high. At some point, they realized Harmony was not responsive. They checked on her. She was dead. Adam Montgomery did not call 911. He did not take his daughter to a hospital. He did not report her death to anyone. Instead, he stuffed her approximately 35-pound body into a duffel bag and hid it in a snowbank near a friend's apartment building next to the dumpsters. For the next 3 months, Adam moved Harmony's body from place to place. He stored it in a small cooler in the hallway outside a family member's apartment. He hid it in the ceiling vent of the room where the family stayed at the Families in Transition homeless shelter in Manchester. When maintenance was called because of the smell coming from the vents, Adam retrieved the bag and moved it again. He got a job at a Portland Pie Company restaurant and stored Harmony's body in the walk-in freezer there. Kayla testified that she helped transport the body, pushing it in a stroller along with her 2 young sons during a 15-minute walk to the restaurant. Eventually, when the family got an apartment on Union Street in Manchester in February 2020, Adam stored Harmony's body in their refrigerator. He bought tools and a bag of quicklime. He talked about dismembering her. He put her body in the bathtub and turned on the shower to thaw it. He asked Kayla to help him cut off Harmony's clothes, and she did. She left the room after that, unable to witness what came next. In early March 2020, Adam rented a U-Haul truck from a friend. He drove approximately 133 miles round trip from Manchester, passing through a toll at the Tobin Bridge in Boston twice, about 40 minutes apart. When he returned to Manchester, he no longer had the bag containing Harmony's remains. He never told Kayla where he had taken the body. He said he did not want her to know in case the police asked. Harmony Montgomery's remains have never been found. For 2 years after Harmony's death, Adam and Kayla told anyone who asked that the little girl was living with her biological mother in Massachusetts. They collected food stamps for Harmony even though she was dead, using the assistance meant for her to feed themselves and their other children, to buy drugs to survive. Crystal Sorey, meanwhile, had been trying to reach her daughter. She had been clean for some time, had gotten her life together, and wanted to reconnect with Harmony. But every time she tried to contact Adam, he evaded her questions. When she asked on Facebook about seeing Harmony for Thanksgiving 2019, Adam blocked her. She had no idea her daughter was already dead. Crystal grew increasingly concerned as the months passed with no contact from her daughter. She questioned Adam repeatedly about Harmony's whereabouts. She reached out to anyone she could find who might know something. She contacted Kayla, who gave her the same story Adam did. Harmony was with her mother, but Crystal knew that was a lie. She was Harmony's mother. She did not have her daughter. The frustration must have been unbearable. Crystal had lost custody of Harmony because of her addiction, had watched her daughter be given to a violent man she barely knew, and now could not even confirm that Harmony was alive. She was told nothing, given no information, blocked at every turn. The system that had taken her daughter from her now refused to help her find out if her daughter was safe. In November 2021, nearly 2 years after Harmony's death, Crystal finally reported her daughter missing to the Manchester Police Department. She told officers she had not seen Harmony since an Easter 2019 FaceTime call, when Harmony had appeared on screen with Adam visible in the background. That was more than 2.5 years ago, the last confirmed sighting of Harmony alive. The Manchester Police Department began investigating immediately. They went to Adam Montgomery's last known addresses. They interviewed family members, friends, anyone who might have seen Harmony. They discovered that no one had seen the little girl in years. She was not enrolled in school. She had not been seen at a doctor's office. There was no trace of her anywhere. On December 31st, 2021, New Year's Eve, police announced publicly that they were searching for a 7-year-old girl named Harmony Montgomery, who had not been seen in over 2 years. It was a shocking announcement that made national headlines. How does a child disappear for 2 years without anyone noticing? How does a little girl vanish from the face of the earth while 2 state governments, both supposedly monitoring her welfare, fail to realize she is gone? Photos of Harmony with her blonde hair and distinctive pink glasses were shared across social media. The hashtag #FindHarmony trended on Twitter. People across the country became invested in finding this little girl, in understanding how she had disappeared, in hoping against hope that she might still be alive. That same night, December 31st, police found Adam Montgomery sleeping in his car with a new girlfriend on Harville Street in Manchester. He was homeless again, living in a vehicle, the same circumstances that had preceded his daughter's death. When officers approached him and asked where Harmony was, he gave contradictory answers. First, he said he had seen her recently and she was fine. Then he said he had not seen her since Thanksgiving 2019, when he claimed her mother had picked her up in Manchester. He said Crystal had come to get Harmony and he had not seen his daughter since. It was a lie, and not even a consistent one. He could not keep his story straight. When police pressed him for more details, he shut down. "I have nothing else to say," he told them, "not talking to you." He invoked his right to remain silent and refused to answer any more questions. On January 4th, 2022, Adam Montgomery was arrested on charges of second-degree assault for striking Harmony in the face in July 2019, interference with custody, and endangering the welfare of a child. These were preliminary charges designed to hold him while the investigation continued. Police strongly suspected that Harmony was dead, but they did not yet have enough evidence to charge him with murder. Kayla Montgomery was arrested the following day. She was charged with theft for collecting food stamps for Harmony, even though the child was not living with her, even though the child was dead. It was welfare fraud, a relatively minor charge, but it was enough to keep Kayla in custody while investigators tried to get her to talk. The search for Harmony intensified. Police searched homes where Adam had lived, using cadaver dogs to detect any trace of human remains. They dug through areas where he might have disposed of a body. They followed every lead, interviewed every possible witness, reconstructed Adam's movements in the months after December 2019. They discovered the rental of the U-Haul truck in early March of 2020. They traced its route through toll records, finding that it had crossed the Tobin Bridge in Boston twice, about 40 minutes apart. They were traveling approximately 133 miles round trip from Manchester. They searched wetland areas along Route 107 in Revere, Massachusetts, a short drive from the Tobin Bridge. They found nothing. On August 11th, 2022, Manchester Police Chief Alan Aldenberg and New Hampshire Attorney General John Formella held a press conference at the Manchester Police Department. The room was filled with reporters and cameras. Everyone knew what was coming. "We believe that Harmony Montgomery is dead," Aldenberg announced, "and we believe that her father murdered her." It was official now, even though they had no body, even though they could not say exactly how or where she died. The investigation had reached a point of certainty. Harmony Montgomery was not missing. She was dead, and her father had killed her. In October 2022, Adam Montgomery was charged with second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, falsifying physical evidence, and tampering with witnesses. The case that had begun as a missing child investigation was now a murder prosecution. Kayla Montgomery was also arrested and charged. She had lied to police repeatedly, had lied to a grand jury, had claimed she did not know what happened to Harmony when she knew exactly what had happened. She eventually pleaded guilty to perjury and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. In exchange for her cooperation, prosecutors did not charge her with more serious crimes related to Harmony's death or the concealment of her body. The trial of Adam Montgomery began on February 8, 2024, in the Hillsborough County Superior Court in Manchester. A Judge Amy Messer presided over what would become one of the most closely watched trials in New Hampshire history. The courtroom was packed with reporters, advocates, and members of the public who had followed Harmony's case since her disappearance became national news. Adam chose not to attend most of the proceedings, a decision that seemed to confirm the contempt he had shown for his daughter's life and death. He sat in his cell while witnesses testified about what he had done, while prosecutors described in gruesome detail the final hours of a 5-year-old girl's life. The empty chair at the defense table became a symbol of his refusal to face what he had done. The prosecution was led by Assistant Attorney General Benjamin Agati and Assistant Attorney General Christopher Knowles. They had built their case carefully over the 2 years since Harmony was reported missing, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, piecing together the movements of Adam Montgomery in the months after his daughter's death. They had forensic evidence, fingerprints, palm prints, DNA residue found in the ceiling of the homeless shelter where Adam had hidden Harmony's body. They had receipts for quicklime, records of the U-Haul rental, toll records showing the route he had taken to dispose of her remains. But their star witness was Kayla Montgomery, Adam's estranged wife, who had agreed to testify against him. Kayla took the stand wearing a red prison sweatsuit, her voice cracking with emotion as she described what she had witnessed. She was serving 18 months in prison for perjury, and having pleaded guilty to lying to the grand jury about what happened to Harmony. She had lied repeatedly to police, to investigators, to everyone who asked about her stepdaughter's whereabouts. She had collected food stamps for a dead child. She had helped move Harmony's body from place to place. Now she was telling the truth, or at least her version of it. Kayla described in horrifying detail what she had witnessed on December 7, 2019. She described the family living in their car, the 3 children crammed into the back seat, the drug use, and the desperation. She described Harmony's accidents, how the little girl could not control her bladder in a car with no bathroom. She described Adam's rage, how he hit Harmony every time she wet herself. She described the final beating. They were driving to a methadone clinic when Harmony had an accident. Adam turned around and punched her. At every red light, he turned and punched her again, hitting her in the face and head with his closed fist. Kayla said she told him to stop, but he gave her a look that terrified her. She feared for her own safety and the safety of her 2 sons. She said nothing more. Adam was getting really angry from Harmony peeing in the car, and he repetitively kept punching her on the way to Burger King, Kayla testified. She described the moment Adam realized something was wrong. She described Harmony's moaning, the sounds of pain that lasted for 5 minutes and then went silent. She described Adam stuffing his daughter's body into a duffel bag, folding her in half to make her fit. She described the weeks and months that followed, the body hidden in a snowbank, then a cooler, then a ceiling vent, then a freezer, then a refrigerator. She described helping to transport the body, pushing it in a stroller along with her 2 young sons during a 15-minute walk to the pizza restaurant where Adam worked. She described cutting off Harmony's clothes while Adam tried to dispose of the body. She described the lime he bought, the tools, the bathtub where he thawed the frozen remains. The defense tried to discredit Kayla, pointing out her history of lies, her deal with prosecutors, her desire to get out of jail and return to her sons. Defense attorney Caroline Smith read aloud from notes Kayla had written in her jail cell. Notes where she had outlined what she wanted in exchange for her testimony: custody of her children, mental health care, drug rehabilitation, immunity. So Smith pointed out that Kayla had even written that she wanted one more embrace, one more kiss, perhaps even a chance to make love with the husband she claimed had abused her. "You said the last time you saw Harmony, she was happy," Smith said. "You had no problem with lying to the grand jury." Kayla admitted she had lied repeatedly. She admitted she had been afraid of Adam, that he had beaten her too, that he had threatened her not to talk. She admitted she had done nothing to save Harmony's life, had watched as her husband beat a 5-year-old girl to death, and said nothing except stop, which he ignored. The defense admitted that Adam had falsified physical evidence and abused his daughter's corpse, but they maintained he had not killed her. They suggested that Kayla herself might be responsible, that her testimony was unreliable, that the prosecution's timeline did not make sense. Only she knows the truth, defense attorney James Brooks told the jury, and only she has benefited from all the lies she has told. But the prosecution had corroborating evidence. They had fingerprints in the homeless shelter. They had the quicklime receipt. They had the U-Haul records. They had witnesses who had seen Adam with a suspicious bag, who had smelled something terrible coming from the vents. The physical evidence confirmed Kayla's story, even if the jurors did not fully trust her. On February 22, 2024, after deliberating for several hours, the jury returned its verdict. Adam Montgomery was found guilty of second-degree murder, second-degree assault, witness tampering, falsifying physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse. He was not in the courtroom when the verdict was announced. He remained in his cell, refusing to face the consequences of what he had done. Every person who has their life taken from them by murder, whether it is a 5-year-old child or a 63-year-old man or a 45-year-old, every single person has a value of their lives, Assistant Attorney General Agati said after the verdict. This case was different in terms of some of the attention that it garnered, but not in terms of the value of Harmony's life or the value of anybody else's life. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu released a statement calling Adam Montgomery a monster. I am grateful to the judge, jury, and Department of Justice for delivering justice for Harmony, Sununu wrote. Adam Montgomery is a monster and deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Attorney General John Formella issued his own statement, focusing on the little girl whose life had been cut short. Today our thoughts are focused on the memory and legacy of Harmony Montgomery, a little girl who did not deserve the tragic fate that she suffered, he said. Our hearts go out to Harmony's family and all those who knew and loved her, and we hope today brings them some closure and peace. On May 9, 2024, Adam Montgomery was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison for the murder of his daughter. For the assault charge, he received an additional 4 to 8 years. For witness tampering, 3.5 to 7 years. For falsifying evidence, another 3.5 to 7 years. The sentences were to run consecutively, meaning Adam Montgomery would spend at least 56 years behind bars before he would even be eligible for parole. He was 34 years old at the time of sentencing. He will almost certainly die in prison. Adam Montgomery did not speak at his sentencing hearing. His attorney said he maintained his innocence on the murder charge, even after being convicted by a jury of his peers. He offered no apology, no explanation, no remorse. On March 12, 2024, a New Hampshire judge granted Crystal Sorey's request to have Harmony declared legally dead. It was a formality, a legal recognition of what everyone already knew, but it allowed Crystal to begin processing her grief in a different way. She could now obtain a death certificate. She could hold a memorial service. She could begin the long process of mourning a daughter she had lost twice, once to the child welfare system and once to Adam Montgomery. Crystal would never be able to bury her daughter. Harmony's remains have never been found. Wherever Adam Montgomery disposed of her body, that location remains his secret. Kayla Montgomery was released on parole in March 2024 after serving her sentence for perjury. She had cooperated with prosecutors, had testified against her ex-husband, had admitted her role in concealing Harmony's death. She was reunited with her 2 sons. Whether she will ever fully reckon with her own complicity in what happened remains to be seen. The case of Harmony Montgomery exposed catastrophic failures in the child welfare systems of both Massachusetts and New Hampshire. The Office of the Child Advocate in Massachusetts released a scathing 101-page report detailing everything that went wrong. The central finding was damning. Harmony's individual needs, well-being, and safety were not prioritized or considered on an equal footing with the assertion of her parents' rights to care for her. The report found that DCF had focused almost entirely on Crystal Sorey and had never properly assessed Adam Montgomery. It found that the court had awarded custody without the protections of the Interstate Compact, without a home study, without any transition plan. It found that Harmony's attorney had not advocated for her safety or well-being. It found that a child who had spent her entire life in foster care had been handed over to a violent stranger based on 40 hours of supervised visits. New Hampshire's Division for Children, Youth and Families had also failed. They had received a report of abuse in July 2019, had opened an assessment, had visited the home, and had closed the case as unfounded. 2 months later, Harmony was dead. No one had checked on her after that final visit in October 2019. No one had enrolled her in school. No one had made sure she was still alive. Crystal Sorey filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the state of New Hampshire, alleging that DCYF had failed to protect Harmony despite credible reports of abuse. In 2024, New Hampshire reached a $2.25 million settlement with Crystal. It was an acknowledgement, however inadequate, that the state bore responsibility for what happened to Harmony. The case led to policy changes in both states. New Hampshire established new procedures for interstate placements, entered into new agreements with Massachusetts, amended policies to require confirmation of residence for children in households being assessed. Massachusetts formed a working group to examine care and protection policies, to establish reasonable time periods for permanent placement, to address barriers to achieving timely permanency for children in foster care. Whether these changes will be enough to prevent future tragedies remains to be seen. Systems fail children all the time. Bureaucracies move slowly, lose paperwork, close cases that should remain open. Children fall through the cracks, are returned to parents who should not have them, are killed by the people who were supposed to protect them. Harmony Montgomery deserved better. She deserved a system that put her safety first, that recognized her as a child with needs and rights of her own, not just an object to be passed between adults who claimed ownership over her. She deserved a court that asked hard questions before handing her to a violent stranger, that demanded evidence of fitness to parent rather than simply assuming that biological connection equals competence. She deserved caseworkers who followed up, who checked on her, who enrolled her in school and made sure she was still alive. She deserved to grow up with the Raftery family, who loved her, who wanted to adopt her, who would have given her the stable home she needed. They had cared for her during her most formative years. They understood her medical needs, her disabilities, her personality. They had celebrated her milestones and comforted her when she was scared. They were her family in every way that mattered, except the one way that the system recognized. Instead, she got Adam Montgomery, a violent man with a violent history, a drug addict who paid for heroin with food stamps meant to feed his children, a father who had spent barely 40 hours with his daughter over 4.5 years, a man who beat a 5-year-old girl to death because she wet herself in a car where she had nowhere else to go. She was 5 years old when she died. She had lived for 5 years and 6 months, most of that time spent in foster care, bounced between homes, never given the permanency that every child needs. She had special needs that required extra care and attention. She was legally blind in one eye. She needed services and supports that she never received after being placed with her father. She was described by those who knew her as a sweet child, a loving child, a happy child despite everything she had been through. Michelle Raftery, her foster mother, testified that Harmony was very happy, very sweet. This was a child who found joy despite instability, who loved despite being failed by the people who were supposed to protect her. Her half-brother Jameson was adopted by a loving family in Washington, D.C., just 2 weeks before Harmony was killed. Blair and Jonathan Miller adopted him in November 2019, giving him the permanent home that should have been Harmony's too. They have been outspoken advocates for reform, demanding accountability for the decisions that sent Harmony to her death. When they adopted Jameson, they asked if his sister was also available for adoption. They were told she had been reunited with her father. They had no idea what that meant, what would happen to her, that within 2 weeks of their son's adoption, his sister would be dead. "We're still trying to understand how Adam Montgomery gained custody," Blair Miller said in an interview. "Like many people out there, we don't understand that either. We assumed a lot when we were told that Harmony was reunited with her father, and the state of Massachusetts supported that." Harmony's body has never been found. Police searched wetland areas along Route 107 in Revere, Massachusetts, near the Tobin Bridge where Adam's U-Haul passed through on the day he disposed of her remains. They found nothing. Wherever Adam Montgomery put his daughter's body, that secret remains with him. And he has shown no willingness to reveal it. No desire to give Crystal the closure of burying her daughter. If you have any information about the location of Harmony Montgomery's remains, please contact the Manchester Police Department tip line at 603-93289-97. Her mother deserves to bury her daughter. The world deserves to know where she is. And Harmony deserves a proper resting place, not an anonymous disposal site chosen by the man who killed her. Harmony Renee Montgomery, born June 7, 2014, died December 7, 2019. She was 5 years old. She had blonde hair and pink glasses. She was legally blind in one eye. She spent most of her life in foster care, never knowing the permanency she deserved. She was beaten to death by her father in the backseat of a car while her stepmother watched. Her body was hidden for months, frozen. We moved from place to place, eventually disposed of in an unknown location. Her death was not reported for 2 years. Her killer is now in prison for the rest of his life. But that is not justice. Justice would have been preventing her death in the first place. Justice would have been a system that protected her, that prioritized her needs, that recognized the danger she was in before it was too late. Justice would have been letting the Raftery family adopt her, giving her the stable, loving home she deserved. Justice would have been a judge who asked questions, caseworkers who followed up, attorneys who advocated for her safety. Justice failed Harmony Montgomery. The courts failed her. The child welfare systems in 2 states failed her. The people who were supposed to protect her failed her. And now she is gone. And all we can do is remember her and fight to make sure no other child suffers the same fate. The Office of the Child Advocate's report on Harmony's case should be required reading for everyone who works in child welfare, for every judge who handles custody cases, for every attorney who represents children in court. It is a devastating account of how a system designed to protect children can become a system that enables their abuse and death. It shows what happens when parental rights are valued more highly than child safety, when bureaucracies fail to communicate, when no one takes responsibility for a vulnerable child's welfare. Manchester Police Chief Alan Aldenberg put it bluntly after Adam Montgomery's conviction. "I still firmly believe that some people in some other agencies need to be held accountable," he said. "And I'm asking for that. This little 5-year-old girl, she deserves somebody to be held accountable that failed along the way, because we wouldn't be standing here today if other people had done their job." He was right. Adam Montgomery killed his daughter. But Adam Montgomery should never have had custody of his daughter in the first place. The system gave her to him, knowing his violent history, ignoring the warning signs, prioritizing his rights over her safety. The system failed to check on her after placing her in his care. The system closed the abuse investigation 2 months before she was killed. The system lost track of her entirely, did not notice she was missing for 2 years. Adam Montgomery is in prison, but Judge Mark Newman, who awarded him custody, retired without facing any consequences. The caseworkers who closed the abuse investigation still have their jobs. The attorneys who failed to advocate for Harmony's safety face no discipline. The system that killed Harmony Montgomery continues to operate, continues to make decisions about vulnerable children, continues to prioritize parental rights over child welfare. This case reminds us that children are the most vulnerable among us, that they depend on adults to protect them, and that when adults fail, children pay the price. It reminds us that systems designed to protect children can become systems that enable their abuse and death when those systems are not properly designed, funded, and held accountable. It reminds us that parental rights, however important, must never be prioritized over a child's safety and well-being. And it reminds us to pay attention. When you see a child with bruises, when you hear a child crying, when something does not seem right, say something, report it, follow up. Do not assume someone else will handle it. Do not assume the system will protect the child, because sometimes it does not. Sometimes no one follows up. Sometimes caseworkers close investigations that should remain open. Sometimes children like Harmony Montgomery end up dead, and everyone points fingers at everyone else, and no one takes responsibility. For Harmony, thank you for watching. If this case affected you, please share this video. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a case. Leave a comment below telling us your thoughts on the failures that led to Harmony's death and what should be done to prevent future tragedies. Tell us whether you think the people who failed Harmony should face accountability. Tell us what you would change about the child welfare system to prevent this from happening again. And remember, every child deserves to be safe. Every child deserves to be loved. Every child deserves a chance at life. Every child deserves to be seen, to be heard, to matter more than bureaucratic procedures and parental rights claims. Harmony Montgomery did not get that chance, but we can fight to make sure other children do. We can demand better from our child welfare systems. We can insist that judges ask hard questions before placing children with violent parents. We can advocate for reforms that prioritize child safety over parental rights. We can remember Harmony, and we can honor her memory by fighting for the children who are still alive, who are still in the system, who are still at risk. Until next time, stay safe. And if you see something, say something, because a child's life might depend on it.